podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they swear skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
You always tell your whole podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. I'm your host, Mark, back for episode 55. 55 with my man, Shawn Beaupre, and we're talking all about my new favorite subject, synchronicity. That's right. And I had a lovely past couple weeks. I hope you guys don't mind. We went really hard there in June. We had 3 episodes a week at one point, and then now we're back to 1 episode a week. What is going on? Well, guess what? This is the first of 3 episodes that will be released this week, and from then on we'll be back to our 2 episode a week schedule, folks. Don't worry. Back on track, recording live from the new headquarters on Sweetheart Mountain. A lot of changes here behind the scenes on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. I am producing the show myself, folks. What? Huh? Yep, that's right. The gang has retired. They have moved on, and I'm taking this on solo, folks. So you're not going to see as much action from my friends on the show as co-hosts. So adios, amigos. We're on to greener pastures, and I really want to thank Jay for all the help they brought me in the first 54 episodes of this show, but I think from here on out, we're going to be seeing them less often. And Jay made that choice to leave the show, folks. If you like Jay, if you want him to come back, you know where to find him. Mighty Tortuga on Instagram. Let him know that you're sad that he left the show, but it's okay. Won't make a difference over here. Because like I said, we're rolling solo now, folks. And this episode is with somebody who I would consider a podcast friend. And I think that's the direction I'm going to take the show. More podcast friends, less real-life friends. The real-life friends were great to help me start this, and they'll still be my real-life friends. But what's interesting is I've already made some podcast friends who've become real-life friends, and we're aligned in our purpose and our path. And that's much more fruitful for me as a human being, a spiritual being who's very curious, and my intention is ascension, right? And I can't vibe with people who aren't in that tribe, at least on a cooperative level, right? It's sort of started to feel like I was dragging my friends along with me. They didn't want to really be on the show as much as I had hoped they would, and that's fine. It's my show. The name starts with the word my. My family thinks I'm crazy. So that's what you get, folks. I hope you like it, because you're going to get a whole lot of me from now on. And Tara, because she's a inspirational force in the podcast, I would say. Definitely inspiring me to stick with my purpose and find parts of myself that I hadn't been in touch with yet. So, exciting things on the horizon, folks. You might have heard hints of Scene. Scene is the synchro-mystic experiment in the ever-expanding now. And I invited Shawn on the show at the dawning of this idea, months ago from when I'm talking to you right now. This was before I found my new place. This was when I was still living, watching my mame's place while she was at my aunt's house, and I had the place to myself, which was great, but I was in a transitional period, folks. So here I am now in the future reporting back. So enjoy this conversation with my man Shawn Beaupre. He's a very smart dude. He's taken intergalactic journeys, multi-dimensional journeys through his mind, and come back with some very wise things to share, namely synchronistic things to share, but also the simulation, which is a subject I wrestle with all the time. I prefer to think of things organically, naturally. So if we want to be in an organic simulation, like Shawn says, that's cool with me. So enjoy the podcast, folks. And remember, go to patreon.com/MFTIC. That's patreon.com/MFTIC.
I was stuck in like this realm of synchronicity, which was just because my ego was gone, basically. I was kind of just floating through reality. But as I was in that state, all my things that I wanted were kind of like coming to me with synchronicities included in them to like confirm that it's all connected. You know what I mean? Like, I go through waves. Like, there's that saying, it's like hide and seek. Like, I can't, to exist in the state of great synchronicity is so difficult. Like, it's as freeing as it is, it's also quite constricting.
You are sleeping. You do not want to believe.
So it is nice to like go in and out of like high synchronicity times and low synchronicity times, just so that you can like catch your breath.
You do not want to believe.
The levels that you experience, are you blending through the middle of the two states from one side to the other? And in that sense, it's just like a video game. And if you really consider the fact that all technology in this universe operates on code, and like computers operate, like it all operates on code, and every creation mimics the creator, we are...
You do not want to believe.
We are like, and oh yeah, and all of reality operates on DNA code. So like, just like based on that, it seems to me like we actually are in a simulation, and there's just either you're aware of it or you aren't aware of it. And we are a main character in our own versions, like in our own reality. It's like we have our own disc. You know, it's like I have a PlayStation and I put my disc in and I'm playing my game. And then you have your own disc and you're playing your game, and then it's like an online game, but you're still in your own version of the game. Do you know what I mean?
You are sleeping.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. With me is a returning champion. You know him from episode 5 of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, and I think this is going to be episode 55. So, wow, look how far we've come, Shawn. Thanks for joining me, man. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. Stoked to get into it.
Of course, yeah, and like you mentioned before the conversation got started here on the record, lots been changing, and I feel it too. I think right now, obviously with COVID, lockdown, whatever, cooling off a bit, maybe that adds to it, but I think there was an overall energy before all that happened where I noticed people were kind of coming together, people were vibing with their tribe more, and some kind of harmony was kind of setting in, and I think we're getting back to that. But one thing that happened to me recently that I wanted to get your take on, because from everything I know about you, you're no stranger to psychedelics. Obviously, you would call yourself a proponent of mushrooms, I would say, right? I mean, you've used them successfully to kind of elevate your sense of self and, knowledge and consciousness, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I wouldn't say I'm a proponent. It works for me. That's
right.
all I can say, right? It's hard to recommend it for everybody because I've been through some things that I don't know if a lot of people could get through, and it took me like years to get through because of psychedelics. So
Right.
I don't think it's for everyone, but it's for everyone who finds it, I would say.
Yeah, if it calls to you. And yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And that's kind of what happened to me, man. I obviously have been called to psychedelics for a while now. I've done them on and off for a couple of years now, when the timing is right. But most recently, I had an opportunity to eat this little bluish white mushroom, and the way life works, everything that was going on in my life at that moment was a little tumultuous. Things were unclear. And I take this mushroom, right? We go to my co-host, Jay. He's a drummer in a band. So I go to his show. I'm there. This chick I'm talking to is there. Everything's kind of going smoothly. I'm entering into a new phase of my life, right? And then as the kind of climax of the night hits, and irresponsibly, I shouldn't have drank beer, but I drank beer, I added a little bit, so it wasn't just the mushrooms at work, but I ended up losing consciousness, right? And moments before I say that, moments before I did that, I said to my friends, I'm in control of my mind, body, and soul. And now they can't give it up. They're teasing me about it every week. Oh yeah, you're in control of your mind, body, and soul. But I said that to myself, right? And I really felt it in that moment, like the mushrooms were doing something to me. And I lose consciousness. I wake up and my friends are picking me up because I was standing in a parking lot. It wasn't like a safe place to pass out. So I fall down. Yeah, I mean, I hurt my head a little bit. I got a hard head, so I'm fine. This was a couple weeks ago. I didn't get a concussion or anything. But yeah, so I kind of wake up out of this unconscious state that was probably provoked by the combination of things I'd taken that day. Mushrooms, smoked a blunt, drank some beer. But I'm sitting there. I'm laying in the car, kind of just collecting myself. My friends are worried about me. But I'm having this profound sense of joy. And I really didn't understand it until the next day. But ever since, I've had this really, really deep sense of purpose. And I don't know if I'm giving away my medicine or something, we don't want to reveal all, but yeah, man, I wonder, what that brings to mind for you. Cause I really think I had some sort of it wasn't even darkness, cause I wasn't in a bad mood, but it was almost like I was brought to the underworld and then resurrected, Yeah,
I definitely understand what you mean. Yeah, that's crazy. I thought when you first were explaining it, you were in a room on a couch or something. So the fact that you're in a parking lot, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, wow. I've never passed out or anything because of psychedelics. I mean, maybe the beer had something to do with that. But I do know there's a very common saying, or I don't know if it's common, but it's in order to gain control, you have to give up control.
Yes.
It's kind of one of those oxymoron kind of thing.
Yes.
And so that could have been, like you said, you felt like the mushroom was doing something for you, and you had just declared, like, I'm in control of this stuff, which maybe that triggered like an unfoldment for you where like maybe you weren't in the place for it to happen, but it accidentally happened at that time, you know?
Mm.
And the fact that you felt joy ever since, like, it just sounds like an ego death to me, or at least a mild one, or like a temporary one, even that I don't know where the passing out fits into that, but I mean, you definitely let go of some stuff.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've let go of like some things that you maybe didn't even know you had to let go of.
Yeah. And since then, I have had this sort of sense of freedom. But the other thing I noticed that's really kind of heightened, right, is this level of synchronicity, because it was something that I had really focused in on when I was a delivery guy, so much so that I realized, like, no, this is, something's calling me to do this. Like, it was more than I was just listening to these podcasts, you know, because I was at like obsession level, like 8 hours a day listening to podcasts, even after work, like listening, you know, like I just couldn't get enough, consuming all this information. And I noticed the synchronicities. The same way. Yeah, and I think that's partly why we vibe. And it's like you take that step forward, right, into the real. And I think you can resonate with this because as a skateboarder, as a photographer, you know, you're doing things by the seat of your pants. You're living your life, you're making your schedule in some ways, and you're kind of like taking your path into your own hands. Whereas most people just walk straight into the control pyramid matrix and you know, let the elite or whoever give them a identity, you know. But guys like you and us, and I wasn't this guy for a long time. I wanted to be a guy like that. I never really realized how until I found podcasting and found my voice. But do you agree with that? It's like when you take that step into the unknown in that way and go outside of what society kind of offers us, the synchronicity and the connection to the universe increases.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. When I was the most furthest away from society after that big shroom trip, my synchronicities were every day, or like not every day, like all day, every day. Like it was like this day carried to the next day, and it was like straight synchronicities all day. Like I was just along for the ride, kind of like a cruise control sort of thing.
Yeah, ride the wave.
Yeah, and what I've come to understand is that synchronicity is really all that exists, and like that's how reality works. That's how it unfolds. It's just nobody has, or less people have the reference points to notice it. You know what I mean? Like when you notice a synchronicity, it's because you paid attention at a certain point prior, and then like, you know, like it requires your attention and to understand reference points to notice these quick things that show up, right? Like it really does. Like to me, it sounds like you released some of what was blocking you, and it allowed you to see more of what reality is. You know what I mean?
Right on.
Like I don't think necessarily synchronicity gets more. I think you just notice more of it.
Yes, you start participating in the real, and it's not that the level or the intensity, well, maybe it's the intensity because your awareness increases, so you're just sort of more of it's available to you in a sense now that you're seeing it, like the observer effect, right, where things in the universe respond to what's observing them. There's an actual recorded effect there. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. And, this fits into something I've been doing on the Patreon, which is like every day I record at least 10 minutes because the synchronicities are flowing in through the podcast. Like I'll notice certain guests will have things that are mentioned that will lead into other things that other guests say. It all bleeds together, and it's almost really, it's a personal thing. So it's sometimes hard to convey like the meaning of synchronicities since they can be so inherently personal. But do you think that, like, because my project is called Scene, It stands for synchronicity, or the synchronistic experiment in the ever-changing now, or the ever-expanding now, right? Scene. So we're focusing on what's seen,
like that.
you know, just like you mentioned, when you raise your awareness, when you become aware of where you are and in the now, you notice the synchronicities more, or you see them, you know. So that's kind of where I've began, you know, taking these steps forward with this new project, because I it's not that I want to accelerate them, but I kind of do. And that's why I wanted to get into this with you. Like, maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to dive into it and co-create my reality in the most whole way possible.
Yes, I totally understand that. And I have definitely hit that stage at a point in my past where things just started, like I said, after that one big shroom trip, everything kind of like was bleeding together in the moment. Like I would see one thing and then my eyes would look somewhere else and it was connected to the last thing I looked at. Like it was actually like a very wild experience for me. And it was like for multiple years. Like it wasn't just like for a week or something. Like I was stuck in like this realm of synchronicity, which was just because my ego was gone. Basically, I was kind of just floating through reality. But as I was in that state, all these things that I wanted were kind of like coming to me with synchronicities included in them to like confirm that it's all connected. You know what I mean? Like, and I go through waves. Like there's that saying, it's like hide and seek. Like I can't, to exist in a state of straight synchronicity is so difficult. Like it's as freeing as it is, it's also quite constricting. So it is nice to like go in and out of like high synchronicity times and low synchronicity times, just so that you can like catch your breath. Because I've like had to pull up my car over sometimes to like regroup after a certain amount of synchronicities hit me at once and stuff. Like it's, I understand what you mean by it's intensified, because like I definitely experienced intensified synchronicity, but I just think it's a different way of looking at it, to realize it's you becoming more aware rather than it becoming more prevalent.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I definitely agree with what you've said and how you've like understood it by going through it. Like I've experienced that exact thing from mushrooms.
Right.
So.
And I think that when we find our purpose, it seems like things accelerate, because naturally everything else in our lives are kind of like great, right? So we resound with that great feeling. And I think what the issue is, and why I love having this conversation, and where I think people can take something from this and not just be like, oh, wow, great for Mark and Shawn, they're living great lives. It's like, no, stop. You're listening to this right now. You're participating in it. There's a reason why you found this conversation with me and Shawn, and you can do what I did to my life if you apply some of the experiences that we convey. And that's the whole project with Scene, right? Where I don't really fully know all of the possibilities that are waiting for me. But if we can participate in the now together and let it unfold in this kind of intimate audio way, I think it would kind of add some energy to it, right? Because multiple people are focusing on a common intention that is ultimately serving the whole.
Yeah, life grows where energy goes, and energy goes where attention goes. So you're doing exactly what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say something else. I forgot what it was because I'm so stoned right now.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, the mushroom thing really was the other level of it was like, so that same week that I had done that experience I described, where I was at the parking lot show and Jay's band had just performed, and I didn't even really express how, like, the mushrooms, like, I was dancing, you know, I was really vibing, and I've always been kind of more self-conscious. I'm 6'8", so I naturally stand out in a crowd, which has made me self-conscious when I was younger, but gotten over that a lot, you know, and especially with dancing, you know, dancing is kind of a vulnerable thing, you know, especially our culture, Western culture, men, you know, we're not it's gay to dance in most, you know, subcultures, I would say, at least where I'm at in New England, you know, like guys don't fucking dance unless it's like rock, you know, or like, you know, rap or something. But anyway, so I'm dancing.
I don't like dancing, I'll be honest with you, but when I'm on certain substances, for some reason, I dance.
Right. And dude, it's so human. I mean, the shamans taking plant medicine and dancing to the drum around the fire. I mean, that is a universal experience that took place in all different parts of the world throughout history. This, you know, community vibe that music brings us, and that feeling of letting loose and dancing. And yeah, so that was part of it. And Megan Kush, right? This beautiful woman, so amazing. All the great things she's done with her life. She's like a 16-time Cannabis Cup winner, and you know, been an advocate for cannabis since like she was 16 years old, and went to jail for acid. You know, like she's hardcore in it. You know, West Coast, fighting for legalization, and she's obviously successful. I mean, look at the fucking West Coast now. You know, everybody's engaged with that. So we had her on the show, right? And I was expecting, you know, to get into mushrooms a little bit, to get into cannabis a little bit, you know, because I had spoken to her on another podcast where I was just the guest, you know, but we really got into it and vibed and had a great time. And the whole reason I had her on the show was because when I was guesting on a different podcast, the Free Thinker Society, I was a guest co-host and she was the guest, and I had to leave early because it's like at a studio down in New Jersey, so I had to drive home. I leave, and Mike texts me, and he's like, hey, Megan Kush wanted you to know that she loves your podcast. And I didn't even think she knew who I was. You know, I was just sitting in, like, letting Mike run the conversation, you know? So I'm like, oh, shit, she listens to my show, you know? So we had her on as a guest, and then she sends me this amazing care package, dude. Like, incredible. Incredible. Like, the things that you can send in the mail, I didn't know were possible. And so without, you know, blowing up her spot a little bit, I'll give away, you know, she sent me some organic weed. She sent me like some good shit, different varieties of some shroomers. So I'm like, okay, here's how this is unfolding, you know, like now I have an opportunity to maybe incorporate this into my life in a little bit a healthier way, because before then it was like, yeah, you know, one pot dealer had it, you know, or this guy had it, you know, you don't know if you could trust them. But here we go, this, like, you know, warrior goddess of the plant medicine world sends me this like intergalactic travel kit through the mail. So needless to say,
it's like the portal.
Sorry, no, it's okay.
It's like a portal opened is what I was gonna say, and it allowed you to like see or have confidence in something that you were already kind of intuitively feeling, but it just wasn't working out. It's like, that's what I mean by things get out of your way, right? Like once you get out of your own way, things start to like happen. You're like, oh, that's why I was thinking that, or that's why, like, you know, it's really weird.
Right. So, you know, and that's part of the now. Like, I haven't really done any of this stuff that she sent me, so we'll see what happens next. But that's also why I wanted to reconnect with you, because I know you've had such incredible experiences with those plant medicines. But my question to you is, like, we also spoke to a woman by the name of Aurora who channels intergalactic consciousness through herself. And that's not really doing her story justice, but people can listen to that episode and figure out what she means. But one of the things she told me is that there are astral beings who can attach themselves to you and your aura when you take these certain substances. So I really, you know, I want to remind people of what you said at the beginning. It's like, I'm not a proponent of this stuff, you know? And I think that's the smartest position you can take, because these things aren't all fun and games, folks, you know? I'm not talking to you, Shawn. I'm talking to people listening, you know, because, like, we're excited about it, and this is a very serious thing, you know? These plant medicines came into our lives for certain reasons, right? Maybe that's true for you, but maybe not, right? Because there are real dangers to taking these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted to know what I found, and finding it was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. Like there's the reason they say truth hurts and you can't handle the truth. And like, all these things. Like, it's not a fun experience to become aware of it in a lot of ways. Like, it is. There is like a heaven and a hell to the truth. So like, you got to go through the hell to get to the heaven, and the hell part is very hard. Like, it's super hard. And like, obviously you can microdose and have like a blissful afternoon, and like that can be all fun and games to a degree, but like anything above 2 grams, like you're stepping into realms that like you might not be prepared to deal with. And like, you might have a ton of stuff going on in your life that you aren't willing to sacrifice, but you are being forced to sacrifice in order to deal with like the inner work that's required to get through these things. Like, it is absolutely no joke to me. Like, I used to kind of be like, oh, mushrooms are for everyone, because I had gotten through a bunch of stuff and kind of reached the heaven. But like, the more I think about it and the more I ground myself back down to like the physical realm, which I've been actively trying to do since the big experience I had. Yeah, I'm very hesitant to tell people to do this. And I believe like the term understanding implies that you stand under the things you don't understand. So yes, you can go the hard, quick path, right? But it is hard. Or you can take the stairway to heaven, which is a gradual like realizations within yourself without any substances. And it does the same thing. It's just not as quick. Like Alan Watts says, there's 2 different paths. One's for the quick-minded and one's for like the people who aren't as quick to like let go of things. Like, I'm really easy at letting go of things, and that's what's required when you realize things, is to let go of the old that you relied on for so long. And it was super hard for me. So like, I really don't think it's for everybody, but it is definitely a tool. And like all tools, like if you misuse them or you don't understand how to use them, you can hurt yourself or somebody else even. Like, it's very weird. Like, I've experienced some crazy things because of psychedelics that I had no idea were even possible to experience.
Are you willing to?
And quickly, before we go into like the psychedelic realm a little more, I want to just quickly talk about what I forgot about, which is synchronicity isn't just for like life being good. Like, if your life is really hard and you're in a rut and you're stuck, the synchronicities are in those experiences too. And if you just kind of start to pay attention and keep score of happenings in your life and like the things you think about randomly, and like third dimension is electromagnetic and you are electromagnetic. So when you are driving down the street and you randomly look to your right, like there's a reason you're looking to your right. And a lot of people just consider it random looking, but there's a sign everywhere, and your subconscious mind is trying to get you to see them at all times. And it's up to you to kind of pay attention and keep score. And like anything, like you could go up to, like you could be in a tough place, a hell-like reality, and you could pull up next to a van and your eye could look at the name of the van. You know, it could say, I don't even know, enter any word here. And then if you pursue that, like go, oh, I looked at that for a reason, maybe I should look up what that word means. You look up what the word means and you'll read a description that will apply to like something you've been struggling with. Like that's exactly how it's worked for me. And that's like how you climb yourself from hell to heaven. Like
right.
Obviously if you smoke weed or do a psychedelic, it opens you up more, you can see more, but it is overwhelming. So like you can do it without them, is all I'm saying. And that is like, it's not just about life getting good. And my life isn't always good. Like sometimes I dip back into hell just to like balance myself out again. You know, so like, I just wanted to like clear that up because I wanted to get that out. But yeah, no, I'm down to go into the psychedelic realms now.
No, and please don't apologize for clearing that up because it's absolutely necessary. I think sometimes, you know, with the law of attraction, we tend to, you know, put ourselves in these good feeling places, and that can almost be a little disingenuous because you're absolutely right. Life is not all good. There's a balance in life, and navigating that balance is what's more important, right? Because you can be great and have these great experiences, but if you can't handle a negative experience, you know, those great moments are going to be a lot fewer and far between because those negative experiences are going to constantly take you back down to that, bad place where you're resonating with that frequency. And something that you touched on in a few minutes ago is being able to let go. And that's part of it. When something negative happens to us and it's outside of our control, we respond to it in certain ways. And I think when we want to control things, we end up responding in ways that leave us feeling like we have less control over ourselves. And giving up that sense of control tends, in my experience, to offer more security and more trust, because that's what it is. You're trusting the universe. There is equity here in the universe, and it's not all good. We don't come here as spiritual beings to participate in a, hedonistic, only good experience. We come here to be molded and shaped by the cosmos as life spirals on, right? So yeah, no, I think really the psychedelic experiences are great and super personal. So as much as you want to share, that's fine. But really, I think what's more useful to people is these kind of this dialogue on what it means to, us, synchronicity, dreams, psychedelic experiences. Like, what are they? What are we actually experiencing? Because psilocybin, it's a fungus, it comes from a fungus. A fungus is a proto-organism, it's one of the first organisms, if you really, look at evolution in that way. I don't subscribe to all of what evolution tells us, but come on, folks, let's look at it logically here. Mushrooms, there's something strange about them. They have a consciousness, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, ultimately, the universe is you. Like, the entire universe is you. That's what the realization of oneness is. That's why they say it's lonely at the top, because once you reach the peak of consciousness, you are the only thing that exists everywhere. Like, you will see you in everything and everyone. And again, not a very comfortable experience at first, but it is very crucial to know that that's what it is, because then you will realize that everything does have a meaning to you and it's just subconscious. Like, and what you were saying about, oh man, I forgot what I'm saying again. There's so much going through my head because you say so much that I want to respond to, and then I respond to one and forget the rest.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll make up for it while you remember, but it's all right. Yeah, I definitely, I think you're onto something, man. The part.
Oh yeah, sorry, I got it.
Go for it.
I got it. So first of all, there's a lot of things saying that mushrooms are for this purpose, like the fact that all that really exists is your brain and your spinal cord, which is your nervous system. And according to science, neuroscience, that is what creates your hallucinated reality around you. And that's why it's your nervous system is electromagnetic and reality is electromagnetic. It's you are this reality because you created it. You just forgot that you created it.
Right.
And that's the whole ignorance thing, or being in ignorance, is you forgetting that you are the creator of the place. And realizing it is super bizarre, but once you realize it, it really changes things. Literally your doubts disappear about everything. Things that would happen in your life, say you fight with a friend and in your head afterwards, you're just kind of stewing over it. Did I do the right thing? Did I do something? Just weird things where you're starting to doubt how you handle the situation. If you are paying attention, synchronicities will come and you will notice them to confirm whether you did the right thing or not. It is that whole movie, I Am Legend. I think that title is referring to the fact that you are the legend of reality. And like you said, there's ups and downs. 3D is duality. So everything is half truth, half lie, half dark, half light. It's all a mixture of both. And when you go inside and realize who you are, being the creator of everything, you can then start to actually tune into the things that are meant for your experience within the soup of self. You know what I mean? I don't know.
No.
So hard to say some of the stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what the image that you brought to mind when you talked about the brain and the spine, I'm thinking about the brain. And it's funny, I have a modeled brain that I took from a science class in high school, this big, heavy plastic model of a brain. And it's the actual weight of a brain, which is pretty cool. But when you look at the brain, you look at the membranes of a brain, membrane. I mean, fungus is a membrane, like I really think that there's a inherent connection there. And the nervous system looks very much like a root system. We know fungus in nature has a almost psychic connection with the root systems of plants, right? Fungus, when it grows around other plants, it has this symbiotic kind of communication network, the mycelial network, where it kind of says like, oh, there's, this nutrient over here, there's this nutrient over here, and a sort of ecosystem, a currency, a resource exchange relationship is created in this symbiotic way. I think, just like you're saying, everything is connected, including you. We are, when we look at the world, we see ourselves in the world, right? Just like you can make these comparisons to the human body and the natural world around us.
Yeah, your level of consciousness determines the degree of which you see your reflection in everything. And like the oneness being at the top where you realize that it is actually all you. But even just like mycelium goes deeper than that. The mycelium network is like when you are in reality and you move your foot to take a step, like the nothingness that you can't see that fills the spot where your foot was is the mycelium network, which is interesting because when you're on mushrooms, you see things between you and the wall, right? Like you start to begin to like become aware of like these inner networks of reality that you aren't seeing before.
Yes, you start to see the fractals unfolding before your eyes.
Well, like the first time I had a realization on mushrooms where I was like, whoa, these things actually show you things. Because I would do mushrooms with a friend, like the same friend. I did mushrooms with the same friend every time because it was such like a vulnerable position when you take certain things like this. So we'd do them all the time, but it was kind of more of an escape because I was trapped in like this court case I didn't belong in. And like I was dealing with relationship issues and like just going through a bunch of crap. So to me, it was an escape at first. And then one experience, we were just chilling in his basement and having like a pretty typical escape kind of experience. And then he went to the washroom and I started to get this weird kind of feeling. And all of a sudden this rainbow appeared in front of me, like floating through the room. Like I stood up and it was perfectly in line with like I stood up perfectly in line with it for some reason, completely intuitively. And it was lined up with like from my like ass up to my head. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like what? That seems too in sync to be an accident. And then he came back and the rainbow disappeared. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then a voice said, next time, come here alone. And that was kind of the last time. That was the last time I ever did mushrooms with somebody else. And that's not true. I did them again with an ex-girlfriend after to try and kind of help her wake up, but that didn't quite go as smoothly as either of us expected. But this one experience, I then was like, I Googled rainbow in the body just because I was like, I wonder if anyone else has had this experience. And I found chakras. And that's when I was like, oh, I can kind of see what's happening here now.
Yes.
And so that from that point on, mushrooms were a tool to me. It was no longer like a drug or an escape or even a medicine. To me, it was like, oh, this is no different than like a hammer to hammer in a nail or a screwdriver to screw in a screw,
Yes.
Like this is like, these are for understanding the universe. And then I started to connect the fact that like, oh, this is why they call it a drug, because there are bad drugs. And if you just call this a drug and just say all drugs are bad, then people are never going to find this tool. And even if they do, there's all these mental illnesses established that like correlate with like aspects of the self you realize when you wake up that like, but there's like demonized. So it seems negative. But if you truly understand like schizophrenia, like I've had voices in my head and they all helped me. And well, not all of them. Some were not helpful, but like it was helpful in like the ability to discern the two. But like, I mean, for the most part, the voices that have come to me from psychedelics were like way smarter than me and had my best intentions in mind. And the only time when it didn't was when I was doing the mushrooms with this ex-girlfriend, and I literally had like demonic voices in my head threatening to hurt me. And I had to go to my parents' house at like 4 a.m. because I didn't even know what to do about my life. Like I was like, oh, demons are real. Like, okay. So like I've dealt with like some negative beings as well, but which brings us back to what you originally said about these entities that can attach to you. And I mean, ultimately the understanding that you are everything kind of like lessens the impact they have on you, because you can just be like, oh, this is just a negative aspect of myself that like that person was carrying for me to get from it. Like, you know what I mean? Like everything's a reflection of you kind of, and sometimes you come face to face with that reflection.
Right. And when these beings, when you allow these beings to take part with you, you allow them to take a part of you and you become less whole, right? And that's why they exist in that astral realm, is because they're not in the powerful place that we are as human beings, you know. And that's, I mean, you can hear tales from myths all over the world of these beings that, you know, are jealous of us as human beings and they want to possess us and all this stuff. And yeah, a really, really close friend of mine, you know, was just telling me something really personal that he's going through. And I reminded him of this. I'm like, hey man, you know, you got to empower yourself constantly, because when you use things, even the good things like mushrooms, to separate your own power from yourself and say to yourself, well, I'm nothing without this, that's when those entities can really grab hold of you. And I think, you know, something that we can get into as much as you're comfortable with is like this dynamic between us and the ones we love when it comes to like changing people, right? You see how you've changed for the better, and everybody, you know, when something works for you, you want to help others. I think that's just maybe my nature. I think most people think that way, but it's like when something good happens to me, I feel good teaching other people about how they can do it for themselves. But what the problem we run into in this way, in this metaphysical way, is like not everybody's in the same point on this journey, right, that you are. So like when your friend was stepping away to the bathroom and your aura, your chakras appeared to you, and then all of a sudden, you know, he came back and they disappeared, and your like super consciousness whispered in your ear like, hey man, this is for you only. You know, it's like that's the key, is like we have to put ourselves first and recognize that even though we are a part of the whole, we have to love the whole through ourselves first, and loving yourself, being whole, right? Am I going off on a tangent here, or are you resonating with this?
Oh no, I'm resonating, but it's like, it's not that you are part of the whole, it's like you are the whole. It's just like there is that sliver of ego that remains all the time that keeps you somewhat separated. Like it's like a lot of people think that, to me anyways, a lot of people think that there is one reality we all share, but we're all different beings within that reality, when really there is one being experiencing different realities. And that's like, when I'm talking to you, I'm really talking to me experiencing the same things as me, but in a more personal to your ego. Like the ego is the mask that separates the fact that we are the same person, ultimately.
Yes. Yes.
And so like when, yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, I just kind of like forgot again what you were talking about. So I responded to that and then got a couple messages.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah. When we're, and that's why I really like this podcasting space that I've entered into, because what you just described there, the mask that separates us, it's absolutely true, man. Because the more I talk and connect with different people in this space, the more I realize that we're all here for the same purpose and asking similar questions in different ways. You know, who are we? What are we doing here? What are we? Why are we here? You know, those basic questions, I think, run through everybody's mind in some way at some point. And if you ignore those questions long enough, I think it can leave you, you know, having like these midlife crises, or, you know, certain things that people who enter into the matrix and fall into society's paradigm, you know, they end up not realizing the consequences that they're, you know, creating for themselves in the future, because they're not taking part in co-creating the reality. And there I go again using the word part, but you're absolutely right. you can only take
Yeah,
part
it's not
because
even
you are the
really
whole. What's
Yeah,
that?
it's not even a co-creation. It is like you creating it. It's just your subconscious is half of the you that's creating it. That's the part that makes it feel like a co-creation. It's very interesting. Like I've been in the realm where like I'm creating the whole reality and aware of it. And like I said, I've been trying to actively grounding myself since, because like you cannot exist in that state to like in the game of things. You know, like it's too difficult for it to be like that. Like it's weird. Like I understand the concept of balance, because at first you go from negative to positive. You're like, oh, this is where I'm staying forever. But then you start to realize like the downside to being always positive, and you need the rainy days to enjoy the sunny days. And it's like, you also have to like navigate it that way. But as you were saying, yeah, a lot of people don't follow those intuitive urges. And like even it was Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think that's what he's implying there. It's like, there's so much that people aren't told about and that aren't in your like first version of awareness, but like if you just look a little bit, you will start to notice things that will benefit your life, and you'll be like, whoa, like this changes everything. Like people need to know about this stuff. But the only problem with that is the truth can only be found within each individual, because third dimension is duality, and the second you bring your idea out into the third dimension, it enters the realm of duality, which puts it becomes half illusion to the other person. And it's almost like even if two people who are wide awake are having a conversation, it's like in the conversation, each person will periodically be put to sleep to a degree to kind of maintain the participation of the experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can expand on that further, but what I'm starting to notice is like there's a deep connection here between your subconscious, conscious, and superconscious mind. And I feel like what you're describing is like you can't exist in that superconscious state all the time because it's too much energy. You know, it's almost like running electricity higher voltage than the circuit can, you know, maintain. You're going to fry it eventually.
Yeah, that's like the flying too close to the sun and burning your wings and stuff, like, or blinded by the light. Like, I do understand that, because like it's as cool as it is to experience that state. I think like it's just like to experience it once, to know that's what it is all that's necessary. And then you're supposed to like come back to the illusion, knowing it's the illusion, but having like the reference point to understand how to navigate within it. And that's what makes the hell within the duality more tolerable, is like the fact that you understand it and can like anticipate things. And when you're in a negative situation, which would normally devastate you, you can then see signs that give you answers how to get out of it immediately. And it begins to start like you start to work with yourself almost by trusting yourself more. You know, it's just a lot of people don't understand that the self expands throughout all of reality because it is reality. You know, like mind over matter is all that exists because the mind is matter, and matter is the mind.
Yes.
It's one of those things.
Yes. The two are not separated. We are whole. And the duality just exists for the like game purpose, you know, so like so you can learn how to navigate within. And now this is where we should start to turn this conversation towards, because one conversation that you had with Sam that I know made a big impact on him, because he talks about the simulation a lot. You know, it's one of the things that he's very curious about. And, you know, you described your life almost seeming like a video game in some ways, right? And I've been almost not opposed to this notion in the sense of its use as a metaphor. I think it's a very useful metaphor or analogy to describe where we are and what we're doing. But I do think that it can be kind of unclear in the sense that it gives people the impression that maybe there is this like alternate reality that it's like a computer that we're actually in, and like, you know, like it's almost like this idea of, what the theologians tell us, that God exists in this real place and he's watching over all of us. And, they expect you to, believe them. And I think that's kind of what this is. It's almost like people are being pushed towards believing that we're in some sort of computer, and that's where society, the technocracy, the artificial means of industry and biological reproduction, this is that technosphere, the transhumanist. I think that all fits together. So part of my motivation for this project that I've started, that I described with you, what's seen, the synchronistic experiment in the ever-expanding now, is reminding people what's real, right? Mushrooms are not created by us. They're not artificial, they're part of the whole. They're whole like us, and I think the technocracy, the technosphere that we've created here over the past 200 years, not us, but humans, has artificialized the original ways that life sustained itself, and I think part of why people are so disconnected and why what we're talking about is so potent and interesting is because we've gone back to the harmony, right? By choosing to not take part in society, by me taking a risk and fucking going out on a limb and, going headfirst into podcasting and then getting hired by Sam, or you going out on a limb and getting into skateboarding despite like it seeming like, maybe this isn't going to be a way to be successful in the traditional way, but you took that risk and you found support, your family supported you, and, you're definitely living your purpose, right? I mean, so maybe I'm going off a little too far there, but the society that we're living in really doesn't create the foundation to participate in the real. So, maybe...
No, it covers it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this, like, simulation theory that's kind of... I mean, it's really popular amongst a lot of the conspiracy podcasts I'm adjacent to. What are your thoughts on that as a metaphor, or do you truly think like we're in some sort of alternate reality like that?
I do think that there is one reality and there are two states within that reality where one is asleep and one is awake. And I think that in between is where all the like levels come into it. It's like there are only two states, and the levels that you experience are you blending through the middle of the two states from one side to the other. And in that sense, it's just like a video game. And if you really consider the fact that all technology in this universe operates on code, and like computers operate, like it all operates on code, and every creation mimics the creator, we are like, and all of reality operates on DNA code. So like, just like based on that, it seems to me like we actually are in a simulation, and there's just either you're aware of it or you aren't aware of it. And we are a main character in our own version, like in our own reality. It's like we have our own disc. It's like I have a PlayStation and I put my disc in and I'm playing my game, and then you have your own disc and you're playing your game, and then it's like an online game, but you're still in your own version of the game. You know what I mean? So you can cross paths with other players in the game, which are also you. But
right. But the major thing that you just said...
But ultimately, you're on your own path within the game.
Right. But the thing I'd like to highlight, though, that you just said is, like, there isn't a distinction between technology and what is real. Those artificial things are a reflection of the real, which makes them real. And you're absolutely right. I mean, when you separate, things, it's easy to get lost, but at the end of the day, it's all just ones and zeros. It's a code, and our DNA reflects that. The way that plants and all living organisms are structured reflects that. Even non-living organisms, the way they're structured reflects these golden means and Fibonacci sequences that we can learn about when we get into some of the more, divine or esoteric of mathematics, right? But yeah, I mean,
but even even the universal feedback loops you get within your reality, though, they operate just like a video game. Like it's like let's say you bought a video game used that you didn't know about, and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to figure this game out anyways without instructions or any knowledge of how to play it. And then throughout the game, it kind of like probably sucks at first because you don't really get it. But then like you start to like, it's like, hey, talk to this guy. And then you talk to that guy and you get a little seed of information from him. And then you walk through a forest and chop a tree down and get, I don't know, like random, like it's basically pointing out synchronicities. And then you go talk to, like, each experience you have is trying to provide you with more information about the reality that you're in. It's just nobody keeps score because nobody thinks that life is like a video game. But if you truly like start to like watch your reality and try to learn about it like it's a video game, like pay attention to feedback loops after you say certain things, after you do certain things with certain intents, like you'll start to notice that this is actually like, it's like a programmed place. Like, that's why I think that, like, government's so evil. I don't think it's ever going to crumble. Like, I think it's, like, part of the parameters of the game, and it's there for the people who aren't aware of the truth. And if you don't understand something, you stand under it, right? So if you're never going to, like, dig through yourself to figure out the truth, then you're constantly going to be stuck in the realm of ignorance, which involves the parent, which is the government, which is a direct reflection of one's ego.
Right.
Because like the ego is what puts you into the third dimension, and the third dimension is mostly controlled by the government unless you wake up to the higher dimensions, which transcend the third dimension.
Right. And what is the government but the governing of the mental framework of our society?
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Exactly. And if reality truly is individual, like I say it is, and each of us are in our own individual realities, then in order to create the illusion of a whole reality, a hive mind, and all this stuff, you'd need to control all the minds, right? You would have to get them all on the same page to continue to create the same experiences, like within the same parameters. But now if people are waking up, it's like things are falling apart almost simultaneously. You know? It's super weird. Like it's like it seems like it's never going to go anywhere, because even like the riots that seemed like the awakening taking place all were completely fabricated. You know, it's like, is there ever going to be a real awakening, or is it really just for the individual to experience their own singularity and then go back to this realm where things don't, they're just programmed that way, but now you have like the cheat codes to have fun within it.
Yes, and see, now this is where it's interesting for me, because you know, and maybe this is the Mars in me, where I'm like, you know, my name is Mark, I have this kind of service, I want to really help people, and something that really fires me up, and it's not, you know, something I haven't experienced myself, is when I see people wasting time. And to me, I wasted a lot of time playing video games. So part of why I'm so interested in talking about this metaphor is because I want to take it back in a more constructive way and show people like, okay, the video games that you can buy at a store, an Xbox, you know, whatever, you're playing that game, it is kind of warping your life in a way, right? But besides that, take the riots. That's a video game. They're creating the narrative, and then they're giving you the, you know, character to play, and then you play within the realms that they create. But when you have a cheat code...
Oh, go ahead. Are they creating the narrative, though? Or is the narrative just a part of the game?
And that's what
what I mean? Like,
and that's what I want to really kind of hone in on, is like, where do we take back our purpose and live and play in the video game that we choose, rather than the video game that's programmed for us, right? And when you have a cheat code, so to speak, you almost, you know, you're going against the intentions of the developer, of the programmer, right? Because their intention is for you to play within the parameters of the game. But if those parameters, like the government's parameters, don't serve your higher purpose or yourself, then I want to be able to teach people the cheat codes, so to speak, to be able to beat the game in the way that the designer didn't intend. So like we have levels of the Matrix like you described, and if we can understand them as maybe different video games, like Super Mario is this version of how to live your life. Like if you become a banker, you're playing that video game. If you become, a janitor, you're playing that video game. If you become a podcaster, you're playing that. So you see where I'm kind of like, so when we start to look at things like that, like, okay, there are certain constructions of reality that are offered to me that I could play the role in those and get something out of it. But what's the original role that I was supposed to play as myself, because if all these artificial ones are being created as options for us, which that's what it seems like to me, I would like to help people find their true purpose. Is that making sort of, I don't know. I don't know how to turn that into a question.
It is, but because the truth can only be found within the individual by raising their own consciousness, which only they can do as much as you want to help them, all you can really do is be a lighthouse, so to speak, or like the way I put it is like, I filled my own cup up over the top, and as like it overflows, it like leaves a trail behind, and other people as they wake up can use the trail that I've left behind to kind of like confirm their own journey. But you can only see what you're already aware of. That's why Einstein says you can't solve the problems in the same levels of thinking that created them. It's the fact that your awareness determines what you see. So if you like, everything is a reflection of you. So you can never get new information from the outside. All you can get is more information about where you are,
Right.
So the whole point is to go within, and you can't go. The only people who have access to themselves are themselves. So like, as much as you want to be like, this is how things work, like that's the duality in things, is they won't hear what you're saying. To you, it sounds so simple because it's like in math. Like when I was younger, I still hate math. I don't like math at all. Like my brain gets cognitive dissonance when I'm around it. It's just not even a path for me. But my math teacher would always try to he'd always say math builds character. So it's helping you in ways that you don't understand. And I never understood what that meant. But as I got older, and actually as I discovered mushrooms, I realized what building character actually was. And that is like the going through of something.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. My phone jumped up at me. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that unfolding, and it's like what you were saying before. You had an expectation of what math was, and your teacher was kind of saying like, hey man, math kind of does its thing on you without you really realizing. I mean, would you agree with that?
By just getting the answers from the back of a textbook, that is doing nothing for you. And so the whole point of showing your work is forcing you to go through the steps of like in a video game, you can't start at level 10 with level 1 knowledge. You'll if it's a battle game, you'll die immediately because you don't have the experience gained from the first 9 levels to get there, right? So it's with psychedelics and truth and stuff like this, if you go giving the answers to people, you are preventing them from understanding how to get the answer, which when you're talking to them and telling them the answer, you are seeing them lift up and they're experiencing themselves lift up. But as soon as you leave, they will fall again because they don't understand how you got them there.
Yes.
So the higher you are in consciousness, the more clearly you'll see things. But and you'll be like, well, I can just say it like this and these people will hear you. But from their state with their reference points, that means a completely different thing to them.
Well, it's almost like when, you train martial arts, you as a black belt, you don't expect everyone who comes into your dojo to be already a black belt. You take them in as a white belt and they progress as time goes on, and you take them through the steps that it took you to get to that point. You don't just say like, okay, here you are, here's my crazy tiger style move. You do it, like you don't, that's not how.
Yeah. You have to make the person do it though. Right? Like they can't just be like, oh, cool, I have that answer now. Like, it's like, that doesn't help them at all. That's the only thing with it. Like and because to talk to another person, you have to travel through duality. Like, even though to you it sounds clear as you're saying it, the communication, like, it'll like scramble it in between. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's very weird because I've talked to people who have the same experience as me to the same extent. They're like a person, my friend, who like, we both had the same kind of oneness experience. We both kind of translated it differently, but we had the same experience, in my opinion. And, oh man, I forgot what I'm talking about. You know what? My brain is nuts today.
No, it's all right. You're talking about like something that a recent past guest, David Way, Taoist monk, kind of talked to me about is like, you can't expect people to, I asked him, I'm like, does your family practice Taoism with you? Do you try to teach them these things? And he's like, no, man, like they just do their own thing. And, if they want to learn, they'll ask me, but you can't expect other people to, see the things that you see. But I guess the goal of my podcast and this kind of project that we're starting here with you as the first guest. Thank you for taking part in the first episode of Scene, a segment of my podcast. My family thinks I'm crazy, but it's all coming together, man. I mean, you really are kind of helping me. I'm honored. Yeah, you're helping me see it because I was kind of opposed to this idea of like video games and the simulation as a metaphor because of the, it just feels transhumanistic to me, with VR and everything they're pushing people to get into. It feels like that to me. But what I want to convey with this...
Sorry.
No, it's okay. What I want to convey with this show is like, life is a video game. Let's learn how to have the funnest, let's make the game the best we can, I guess. I mean, that's kind of a dumb way to put it, but maybe I'll come up with a smarter way to put it later on. But yeah, like, if life is a video game, let's fucking learn the cheat codes and have the most fun with this we can, right? Because that's why people play video games, because they're fun. But
what I was going to say before was the karate thing that you talked about, or martial arts, is like a lot of people at white belt stage see it as like just a straight battle to the death, which in a sense, I guess it kind of can be. But like ultimately you learn things on the way to black belt that's like you use momentum in your favor and you're not always the one striking. Like it's not always about like, you know what I mean? Like it's like your whole perspective changes as you go through the steps of like consciousness.
Oh yeah.
That's what gets you to the state of the black belt.
Yeah. What you said there is really funny because it's absolutely true for me. I go into martial art. I went into martial arts thinking like, okay, I need to be like the best fighter because like I'm getting my ass kicked in these like little school arguments that were happening in middle school and high school and stuff, like I'm getting my ass kicked. I need to be able to fight, and what I realized after I actually got good at fighting is like you don't want to fight anymore. Like a lot of people come into martial arts because it's life or death. They got to defend themselves. They're feeling like, oh shit, like my safety is at risk, And what you realize is this profound sense of confidence that really steers you out of any of that conflict in the first place. Because once you take that mental discipline step and reconstruct yourself in that way, you don't fall into those little ego whatevers that got you into fights, or you don't put yourself in those dangerous areas that maybe dangerous people are at that might want to just fuck with you for no reason at all because their life is fucked up and that's just how they operate. But you don't have to engage in that. You can have the awareness and engage in your true purpose, which is never to be, harming others, right? Those people who harm others, they're not living their true purpose, No,
and they say that the most true martial artist is the person that can solve combat with his words or something like that, or with his mind.
Yeah.
Instead of with like physical abilities. Like, yeah, no, I totally agree with what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I'm stoked to be on this podcast, like the start of something. That's dope.
well, and you were a part of the start of My Family Thinks I'm Crazy in a real way too, because when we met, you know, you helped me out. I had you on Zero, and I knew you would be an interesting person to talk to just based on what you texted me. You know, I don't know if, right, you hadn't done any podcasts before that, so I didn't have...
I did one, but it was like, yeah, no, I was still very new to the game.
Well, and I guess
yes, you did help me out, and I appreciate you for that.
No, and I'm not trying to like say, "Oh, look at me for helping you out," but I'm just kind of like,
no, that's not how I took it.
No, I know, but as a booker, you know, traditionally I would kind of like just find other people who had already been on podcasts, you know, because that's the safe bet, you know. So, but I trusted my instincts, and look where we are now. You know, not only have you had really awesome conversations with Sam, but you've also had really awesome conversations with me. And I think people appreciate that wisdom, you know, and that's kind of the synchronistic vibe that happens with the podcast, because you don't know when, where, how someone's going to find this conversation. Once I publish it, it's just out there in the universe, you know, just like I found Tinfoil Hat the first time in like 2015 or whenever it was, you know, or 2016. But, you know, like it was just so, you know, and that's why, yeah, man, I just wanted to point that out, that I'm very happy to have you on the show again, because you were a big part of the initial like move for this podcast. I had you on my show. We had a great conversation. You talked to Sam. That was a great conversation. And it's not because like you have some book to sell or anything like that, like most podcast guests would. It's because you're a true, authentic human being, and that's why people come to podcasts. You know, that's why I started this podcast cooperative, because I really love my voice and being able to talk to people, not because of an ego reason, but because there's a sense of service there, you know, like talking to people. I've always just taken really, you know, it's just a skill that came naturally to me. So I found this thing, and now I'm doing it with my whole heart, you know, and when that happens, when you're living in your purpose, you find other people who are just as authentic and living in their purpose. Yep. You know, here we are now, brother.
Like the track, like the track, and it's actually pretty fitting that I was on number 5 and 55, because 5 is the number of change in angel numbers.
Yeah.
And so, and this started by talking about changes, right? So it does all correlate, which is pretty interesting. And also that whole tinfoil hat thing that, and meeting you was very synchronistic in my life, just based on the fact that I had an awakening that I didn't know what to do with. And then this being I was talking to said that you will be provided with platforms to share it as you understand it more.
Yes.
First of all, I was like, okay, whatever. But like, then I would listen, because tinfoil hats and like maybe a few other podcasts, Duncan Truffles was like one that resonated with me quite a bit. And they like, I listened to them religiously for 7 or 8 years, like every day, because I worked a job that was just like a mindless job. And I was able to just podcast all day, or listen to podcasts all day. And then I stopped listening to tinfoil hat and stuff. And then Matt Belair was on, like, because I got so busy, I didn't have the free time to just listen to podcasts all the time. Life was just way more busy than it had been before. And then I commented on Matt Belair being on one of Sam's podcasts, and then you direct messaged me for, like, I didn't ask for anything, and you were like, hey, do you want to go on the show? And I was like, wait, what? Like,
yes,
it was like,
yes.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, to me, I was like, that was like full circle from 8 years before, when this being told me you'd get given platforms, because like you literally gave me a platform. Like, I didn't give you any reason
now
to like hit me up, you know, like.
Now let me serve the tennis ball of synchronicity right back, because I mean, the biggest moment in my life that pushed me into this path came from a book called Ancient Teachings for Beginners, right? So, you know, almost like spirituality for dummies, but a little more cool. And one of the things I learned in this book was a chant for your third eye. Thoth, Thoth, Thoth,
Oh, wow.
And I would do that chant, man.
I felt that.
Yeah, I would do that chant, bro. And I would do that, and my third eye, I really feel like my third eye opened. And one of the things that it said in that book, it warns you, it's like, don't do this more than, a couple times. When you feel the shift, you don't have to do it anymore. And that to me was like, wow, okay, they're not trying to sell me anything. If they were, then they'd be like, oh, you got to do this, and then buy the next book, and then buy the next book. You know what I mean? Like, this book was so, like, the message just really resonated with me, and everything that was going on in my life too at the time. Like, people who've listened to every episode might know a little bit about this story, but like Amos, my mentors, and one of the first mentors I've ever had, a real spiritual mentor, Pueblo Indian, came from Arizona to kind of pray in this warrior way for his ancestor Geronimo, whose skull and bones were in the Skull and Bones tomb to this day, robbed by Prescott Bush. This is a man whose story, like, boom, hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm like, whoa, like, I'm learning about all these conspiracies, and here's a guy who's like living this truth. I feel his honesty, and he's telling me these things. And one of the things that happened, Shawn, when I did that Thoth meditation, is I found this feather, this eagle feather or a hawk feather that's still, it's only 5 feet away from me. I've had it since then. And I brought this to Amos. I said, dude, check it out. I did this meditation. My consciousness felt like white, I really felt something change, and he was like, really, man? And he's like, you found this. And when I opened my eyes after doing this meditation, the feather was just kind of like floating on the tall grass, just like in this really etheric way. So I told him about it. I didn't show it to him. I left it at home, but I told him about it, and I was like, hey, yeah, this happened. And he's like, well, I said a prayer about you. I asked the Creator, if you're a true human being, And he taught me about what feathers really were, and to his, tribe, and what they meant, and how they carry your thoughts up to the Creator, And ever since then, I've found feathers, synchronistic moments in my life, and when I wanted to have Matt Belair on the show, it was because I love Grimerica so much, and I thought, like, wow, like, these guys are talking to so many great people, and Sam hasn't even spoken to half of them, and they're all on this really cool spiritual vibe that Sam was getting into with his new show Zero. So I'm like, you got to have this guy Matt Belair on. And Matt Belair kicked so much fucking ass that Sam was like, dude, this is a tinfoil hat episode. So the fact that it went from being Zero to tinfoil hat because it was so great, like, that reached you, and then I saw your comment resonated with me enough to be like, yeah, dude. And at that point I was hitting people up on Instagram too, because it's like, there's so many people out here like me. Like, what makes me any better than them just because Sam picked me to be a booker, Like, I'm not on podcast. I don't have my own podcast going, my ego wasn't a part of it. I was just like, let's get this going, and you were a big part of that for me, because Sam, another person who Sam was like, whoa, this guy's great. We got to have you back on, So yeah, man, this is
it's tricky to hear those words. I'm gonna be honest with you, but from Sam, like, just because, like, I listened to him for so long, and in my head I'd listen to episodes and be like, I could give closure to a lot of this stuff, and I'd be like, I will never talk to him, and all of a sudden I'm talking to him. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
And and in a way, that's the parody and the paradox that I've discovered through working for him. And it's great because Sam is Sam, and that's just who he is, And the fact is like, he's going to have the conversations with people, and what's going to resonate with him is what's going to resonate with him, And I just have to be able to separate myself and have no expectations. But there are some times where I'm like, all right, Sam, this is what the guest is going to talk about, and, this is what they're knowledgeable about. And then they don't, that topic doesn't even come up. But it's fine. It's like you said before, I've let that go. I don't have any expectations, and it's not my job to produce the show. It's just my job to set the conversation, set the table, so to speak, And yeah, that's kind of, I think that's the cool thing about his show in a way, is like, he doesn't pretend to know anything. Like, he's just in this kind of genuine place of like, it's all new to me. And, you know, I don't know, man.
I love that about his show. I love that about his show.
I don't know if they'll ever be those conclusions that, you know, both of us would, you know, like to have the conversation and be like, you know, he has to find that on his own, you know, over time. But I think that you are part of the framework, this, you know, what's it called? A blanket, you know, what do they call it? Quilt that's being woven through the conversations that he's having on this podcast that are not only dropping little seeds of wisdom in his spirit, but all the people who listen. And it's a massive audience. I mean, 100,000 people saw me on YouTube talking about Aleister Crowley, you know? So it's like, he's got a huge impact on so many people, and just having one conversation with him, like, you don't know how many people's lives you've had an impact on just through that 1 hour, 2 hour conversation.
Well, I'll tell you from the overwhelming inbox messages I got afterwards, and even after reposting it again yesterday, it's insane. Like, it blows me away that I could even help one person in the way that I've helped a ton of people. And by helping, I mean, like, was able to be on time for something they were looking for, right? Like, I don't feel like I have a responsibility to help anybody, because that's their responsibility, and we each have that same responsibility. It's like,
hold on,
you have a self.
Speaking of Sam, he's calling me right now. Let me just put you on hold. Yeah, that too. That was really strange. So we're talking about Tinfoil Hat Zero, and then Sam calls me about other things. But anyways, back to the now. We're back here on scene, in the scene, looking at what's seen with Shawn Beaupre. Shawn, you were talking about the feedback loop?
Oh, I was just talking about the feedback I was getting from being on Sam's podcast, because, like I said, it's cool that I could help even one person in, like, at all on their journey, or at least be there for them to, like, benefit from. Because, like, I got tons of messages saying, like, I've helped a lot of people just from what I said, even though it was them just noticing things in what I said. But it made me feel, like, super crazy. It was, like, overwhelming to an extent. And the only thing is like, it's like the problem I find with offering this kind of information is people become reliant on you as the trusting source, which is like, the whole point is to find it within. So a lot of people are like, oh, I resonate with you, which is great, but resonating isn't experiencing or knowing, it's subconsciously knowing. Like, you just, like, so, like, a lot of people I will, like, have one-on-one conversations with, and it's like they are benefiting, and it's like, obviously they're benefiting from it, but then because it's like they just take the information and they don't actually experience it, they got to keep coming back to me to, like, get reminders of it or things like that, which is also fine, obviously, but, like, the whole point is to find it within. And even though, like, there's anybody that seems truthful and everything, like, trust me, if you find the truth within, it will even differ slightly from those people to you. You know what I mean? So it's like, don't become so reliant on outside sources, even me, even though it's super good to get the feedback. Like, it's like, I'm just sharing this information so that it's out there, because when I woke up, I was like, why isn't this out here more? I know there's more people that know about this stuff. Like, it's so weird to me. So I just wanted to be that lighthouse that was sharing this information, you know? But it's super cool that it helped so many people, and it really changed, like, my own inner credibility with it all too, because, like, for the longest time I was being dismissed with eye rolls, and now all of a sudden I was having an overwhelming amount of, like, support coming my way, and, like, people, like, thanking me, and it was like, whoa, what's happening right now? Like, it was very weird. You were like a gatekeeper for me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't ever want to be any sort of gatekeeper, but I want people to know that, you know, I'm just taking it all in the moment. But I think the synchronicity of us connecting is really awesome. And I think one important thing to highlight, though, with what you're saying, and I think you understand this really deeply, is like, yeah, people will reach out to you and gain something from you, but it's important for them to understand that it's on them ultimately to make those changes and have those experiences for themselves so that they can lead in the same way that you have. Because in this world, we're all meant to ascend, I believe. I believe we're all meant to ascend, and maybe it's not just this lifetime, maybe it's many lifetimes, but when you're in a position where you have interesting things to say that are creative, wise, knowledgeable, that resonate with people and their sense of self, you know, that's not something to be underestimated. That's you reflecting the creator, just like we mentioned all of the things around us reflect. And, you know, people have to recognize that they have that same ability as well. Because when we...
But even just like the whole concept of playing a higher level than you are capable of playing, like if I talk to, like I can lift people up one-on-one conversations and take them to a place where like, whoa, this is crazy. Like I never even knew this was like this. And then they'll make a decision at that height that like sets something in motion that when they like fall back down slowly over time because they don't truly know why they got to that height, they now have responsibilities that maybe they're not capable of fulfilling. And then they'll come back to me going like, oh, this happened and I don't know how to deal with it. And now all of a sudden I'm like a therapist for somebody, you know, like that's the danger I find in it all. Like I love being a lighthouse, but like a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people kind of like rely on the lighthouse too much, like for their own good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So I just want to make sure that's clear because when I explain that to people after it happens, they're like, "Oh, that makes sense," and then they kind of like take the responsibility and it works out for them. But like I just noticed it happened a lot, so I just wanted to like clarify that. I like this stuff that I'm sharing and that you share and that like the quote unquote awakened people share, it's within every single person. And you're right, every person, like your responsibility here is to do that, to realize like that post I made yesterday on Instagram. It's like there's only light and darkness is just the absence of light. And your job is to like find the darkness and turn it into light. Right. And as you do that, you'll become more aware. It's not, you know, it's not find the light outside, it's find it within you.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what people are going to begin to understand or overstand, right? When they see what is to be seen here on Scene. And don't rely on this podcast or any podcast. Rely on only yourself, because that's all it is at the end of the day, your perspective, you know, ultimately. But you're part of the whole. You're not separate from that. I mean, I think we've beat around the bush on that point enough for people to understand it. But Shawn, dude, this has been fun, man. I mean, I'm kind of feeling a little burnt out. I don't know about you, but I definitely enjoyed talking about all this stuff. I think this is the beginning. We'll definitely have to have you on. Let's see, we have 55. We'll have to have you on sooner than that. So maybe we'll figure out a synchronistic number so we don't wait till like episode 105 or episode like 155 or, you know, let's get you back on sooner than that. You know what I mean, Shawn?
Sounds good, man. Yeah, no, it's super good to talk to you again and about all this stuff. I always buzz after talking about this stuff. And also I wanted to say congratulations on all the like growth you've made. Like it's super cool of all the like big people you've had on your podcast and able to share.
Thank you.
You know, like,
yeah.
Like you said, it wasn't that long ago that you were just like a person kind of not really knowing how to go about this stuff. And now you're like talking to some people that a lot of people consider untouchable, like I am. So like, it's like, I relate with your path big time.
Yeah, man. And that's why you're here. And I think that's why I have confidence in saying you'll be back again to build further. And thank you for pointing that out, man. We certainly have grown a lot. And I want people to know that that's like that's maybe the possibilities for me as a podcaster, and you can extrapolate that into your own life. You know, if you're like, you know, really into cars, like there's a way to work this so that you can, you know, find as much value and synchronicity and accelerated growth in whatever you're interested in as I have with what I'm interested in. You know, it's universal. It doesn't just apply to like, oh, well, if you know, gain all this, well, then you can have a great podcast too, you know? Like, it's so much more than that, you know? The podcasting thing is just a convenient medium for something so authentic, which is a human dialogue, interaction of two consciousnesses, which are really ultimately the same, part of the same whole.
Yep, like Nipsey Hussle says, life is just a battle between you and your disbeliefs. Anything's possible. It's just you who stands in the way of it.
Wow. All right. What a way to end it, man. I know you don't have a podcast to plug, but is there anything that the listeners can go and check out if they want to support you in any way, show you some love? Obviously, they can go see you on Zero and Tinfoil Hat.
Yeah, just I am going to start my podcast soon. It's just I have an opportunity to share something, and I just want to make sure I share it properly. So I'm just kind of navigating in my head how to go about it still. But yeah, you just follow me on Instagram at Beaup72, BEAUPS 72, and I share a ton of stuff on there. And if you want to message me, I'll respond as soon as I can. I love being able to guide people, so don't hesitate to hit me up. I've helped a lot of people in the sense that they were willing to do the work I was kind of guiding them towards.
Right.
So if you are on the path, then I believe that I can help guide in a way. And if you want to hit me up, feel free.
Wow. Well, bravo, Shawn Beaupre. There's big things in store. I can feel it, folks. Be on the lookout for that podcast, because I'm sure it's coming soon in whatever shape or form Shawn creates. It's going to be awesome. This guy, he's doing a lot. He's skateboarding. He's taking awesome pictures, and he's guiding people to be their own lighthouse, folks, because it's not about being some kind of guru or joining some kind of cult. Fuck that noise. Be your own person. Thank you for listening to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. And check us out on Patreon if you want to see the whole